What exactly makes a horror movie actually a horror movie? I think when most people think of horror, they think blood, guts, maybe a monster, definitely a killer, or at the very least a threat to a character's life or something in the movie. As we list the ways and things that can threaten us in our minds, one must realize horror really has to revolve around death in the end. Be that death of a person, death of a way of life, or as in the case of 1989 Celia, the death of innocence. It's the 1950s in Australia. Celia rushes into her grandmother's room one morning to discover she's done what all of us will do, sooner or later, pass on. After Grandma's funeral, Celia continues her life as a child, full of play and mischief. She acquires a rabbit, meets the neighbors, who turn out to be communists, and even has occasional visits from dear departed Grandma, who taps on the window at night. Or is that the slimy hand of a Habia, the strange blue goblins from books that both frighten and fascinate Celia? It turns out Grandma was a bit of a communist in her younger days, and while her participation in socialist, communist, and women's rights groups jaded her son, Celia's father, they also intensely interest Celia. She often sneaks off to Grandmother's room to look at her books, much to her father's displeasure. Celia's interest in the mysterious world of adults, a world of politics, sex, and eventually, death, all swirl together, coming to a violent outburst after the Australian government confiscates her pet rabbit to stop the plague of rabbits that was occurring during those times. Celia was a great movie. It's a real surprise, really. Given, I went in expecting this to be a dark fantasy movie along the lines of The Never-Ending Story and other 80s films that had that kind of fantasy tinge to them. Return to Oz, movies like that. I often spent parts of the movie wondering, is this a straight-up drama? Well, no, it can't be, because Grandma's digging herself up out of the grave every night to pay a visit to Celia, and then the kids go and make voodoo dolls to punish the adults with seemingly effective results. This is not just a drama movie. Celia was something else entirely, and I want to strongly express to you that I was not disappointed with where things went, just surprised. To give you some reference, Celia is like the Christmas story. While there isn't a narrator speaking about what's going on in the movie, there is a stream of events, and it's much the same sort of movie. A young kid experiencing all sorts of situations that you may have experienced as a kid, tinged with sudden bouts of the fantastic, and also the unfortunate. Yeah, Celia is just a bit darker than Ralphie in A Christmas Story. Imagine that movie, but with an alcoholic father, Ralphie's little brother was a ghost only he could see, and instead of receiving radio ads about little orphan Annie, somehow Ralphie was picking up secret radio broadcasts from Nazi Germany or something like that. That's kind of the way Celia goes. But it's not so outlandish that it's making things up. They're all events that were based in reality and historically accurate, so it's interesting. It's a child's take on what was really going on at the time. Celia is truly dark and truly horror, and somehow truly real. It is a dark fantasy. It has ghosts, monsters, and all things that thrive in the imagination. But it's all presented in the lens of a child's perspective. The audience will likely understand that these are the fantasies of Celia. Their presentation is strikingly outlandish, but they aren't just there for cheap thrills or to shock. Rather, in the overall picture, these visions make a very serious depiction of a child coming to terms with the harshness of the grim world that is the adult. Celia is like real life. It shows that children live in a splendid world of imagination, one that is doomed. As a child ages, it is guaranteed that that child's views will eventually clash with the uninvited horrors of the world around them. They come in the form of overbearing governments taking away rabbits, petty adults forbidding relationships they don't approve of, and the cutting, inescapable pain of simple loss. Celia experiences the death of relationships when her friends move away. She experiences the death of joy when her rabbit is taken away. And she experiences the death of innocence when she finds that actions do in fact have consequences. We learn through Celia in the movie that the more we try to hang on to things, the more they escape us. Celia isn't make-believe. It's a child trying to use make-believe to interpret the horrors of the adult world and to cope. Disillusionment is the purest, most realistic form of horror there can be. No, the demons in the movie aren't literally demons, but the parents are. Does that make sense? As a film, Celia has excellent pacing, a good soundtrack, great performances by the children and their caretaking adults, and good monster SFX. Overall, though, the movie's biggest strength is just how in touch it is with childhood. The creators definitely had their fingers on the pulse of, a light shining on the primitive fears of, and the time to humor the pure energy of being a child. Remember being stuck in a chair in an almost unbearably hot, dark movie theater, being bored by whatever movie was playing, desperately wishing that you could just get up and run around and burn off all that energy you had inside of you? Celia shows a 2-minute scene of the kids doing just that, running around a theater in the dark, for no other reason than to show that kids are living, breathing balls of energy. In a bad movie, this would be an annoying, pointless scene, but in the poetry of Celia, it makes sense. It's kind of like a pause, and then you really see that these are just kids, and they do weird things sometimes, just to do weird things. I was so engrossed in being that age again throughout the movie and enjoying the story that many moments truly shocked me. I absolutely didn't see the things this movie was going to do coming, and I refuse to speak more of it so you can really just go enjoy them as naturally as possible. It's worth your time. Remember, horror is not just the inclusion of certain elements. True horror is the accuracy of which familiar things, situations, and feelings can be conveyed to elicit emotions. When we are truly alive in a moment is when we are most aware of death. Celia is a film well worth your time. I give it 5 creepy blue hands tapping at your window at night out of 5. Are you prepared for a trip back to when you felt invincible, but were actually more vulnerable than you ever knew?
All of these things are designed to frighten a monkey.